And welcome back to the Cooler Jets podcast, where it's Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Well, Michael, been a couple weeks since our last podcast. Obviously, the schedule for the 2024 season dropped on Wednesday, so we're going to be taking a look at the biggest matchup, in our opinion, of each one of these games. But first, how are you doing? Obviously, you come to this podcast with a heavy heart. We're recording this Sunday night after the Knicks' tragic Game 7 loss at the Garden. So I know we haven't shown up the last couple weeks, but Michael, you toughed it out. You're here today. How are you feeling, man?
Yeah, I got to honor the spirit of the team, just like Josh Hart, just like OG. I got to fight till the very end, give every last ounce of effort that I have left. So that's what we're doing. We're toughing it out here on the night of a difficult Game 7 loss. But I'm proud of the team. I mean, we have a lot to look forward to, but doesn't change the fact that it hurts a lot right now. But we're going to talk about the Jets schedule, and we're going to bring the vibes right back up.
I know the schedule release is always kind of clowned as like, why is this a big deal? But I have to say, there's something about that schedule getting out there that it really kind of puts you in the football spirit. You can finally picture these matchups. I think it does matter.
Since you brought that up, like you just reminded me of a little thing that came to mind a few days ago. There are some people that they show up on Jets Twitter. Let's just say maybe they write about the team for a living, and they're saying like, why do people get so excited about the schedule release? Like, we haven't watched football in 3 months. We haven't watched the Jets play football in 4.5 months. This is big news. We get to see when games are happening, which ones are on prime time. It's just something to have fun and talk about. Like, can you just be quiet and tweet about your insignificant life that no one cares about?
All right.
Why do you tweet about that? That's my question. That's my question. So let people enjoy the schedule release. How about that?
I completely agree with you on that, because there is something about just picturing those matchups. And also it does matter. I mean, like, depending on how many primetime games, and obviously the Jets, I think, I know they have an unprecedented amount of primetime games in the first 11 weeks of the season. You see how much they have to travel, when they have to travel, when their bye is. I think the Jets did well, and when they got their bye this week. Obviously, they have that choice, and we'll get into the schedule. Obviously, everybody's read it by now. But, I will say, I think the reaction to the schedule was a little overblown. Like, people were talking about it. Like, I kept seeing, like, I know it's unprecedented in the terms of primetime games they have, and I know some fans are upset about the amount of primetime games. One, because of just like the added pressure on the team, but mainly because if you're going to the games, it's just better to go to a 1 p.m. game and not be stuck in MetLife traffic at midnight. But people talking about this schedule like it's like the hardest schedule they've ever seen. Is like, I actually think in comparison to the last few years, you look at those first 5 weeks, that's 4 games the Jets are favored in. Right. And they're only not favorites in, I think, 3 games this year? Something like that?
Yeah, 14 games. But I agree with that. I think that's the aspect of schedule reactions that is a little bit overblown, is like how difficult it is based on the rest, or like where games fell. Like, we all knew what games they were going to play. We knew it 4 months ago. So I think that aspect of it, like looking at it as if the season difficulty is any different than it was 2 weeks ago, I think that's a little overblown. But I still think it's fun to just see it, and you could just really visualize what the season is going to look like. So overall, I still enjoy it, but I do think that aspect is a little overrated.
Well, and you had that point too, where one of your articles recently, where it's like, the Niners could be having a Super Bowl hangover, they could take a real setback, and the Titans and Vikings could go to the Super Bowl. Like, you have no idea what's going to happen, especially by the time you get to, week 7, week 8. I mean, it's a completely different season. I mean, the Jets season completely changed trajectory in the first game of the year this year, and it's going to happen for some teams this year with different injuries. It's like, you look at that week 6 matchup on Monday Night Football against the Bills. It's like, hey, if Josh Allen were to go down in the first 5 weeks of the season, how much different is that matchup? So it is a little early to be making predictions. We're not going to be making predictions in the games like we've done that in years past, where we've done like, we think they're going to win 9 games this year. And I know you had that tweet where it's like, hey, shouldn't be afraid to predict 12, 13 wins this season. And,
for sure.
I think we've rode the fence on that 9 win, maybe even 10 if you're being optimistic. Yeah. 7 at worst, I think, is what we did in 2020. Like, in that ballpark, just kind of playing it right down the middle. But this is the year where it's like, on paper, this is the best team I've ever watched. This is really their prime window to go and win a lot of games. Why couldn't the Jets go and win 12, 13 games? And yes, again, it's early to say that, but you look at their matchups, you look at the schedule, and they have a lot of winnable games. A lot of games are going to be favorites in. The number one thing you can pay attention to is the quarterbacks that they face. And really outside of Allen, outside of CJ Stroud, I know they have Stafford later in the year, but you go through the amount of young quarterbacks they're going to face, former Jets quarterbacks they're going to face, middle of the pack quarterbacks they're going to face. That's where the Jets that's where you can really look at a schedule and say, like, this is not a murderer's row schedule. The primetime games are tough. Going to London, coming back and being on primetime the net, 2 weeks after that, like all that stuff might be kind of hard, but I think they have a rest differential of like 5 days. They get their only other West Coast trip out of the way week 1, playing the 49ers. The only other one they have is week 10 against the Cardinals. So, and then, it's like you look at that, it's like that Patriots, they get a nice little runway to kind of maybe build up some momentum, work out some of the kinks, let Rodgers get back in the flow of things when they go from that Titans, Patriots, Broncos. I'll include Vikings there just because they have a young quarterback. So you're looking at, if you're just going by the betting lines, which, they might start 2-0 and then lose week 3 to the Pats. It's like, this is a team that could be 4-1 heading into week 6. Again, try to stay away from that line of thinking. But I look at the schedule and I had me excited. A lot of primetime games, so I know it sucks for people going to them, but it is fun on TV. The 7 national games and room to add more down the line. I mean, the spotlight is on, and let's just hope that they can stay reasonably healthy. So let's get into the topic for today's podcast, Michael. We were like, well, we're recording this Sunday. Everybody's already seen the schedule. How can we do this somewhat differently and keep it interesting? And we're like, you know what? Let's pick a matchup from each one of these games that we deem the biggest or the most important matchups, assuming everybody's healthy, which some of these matchups might go in the bin by the time they roll around. But I think we did a nice job of compiling a list here, Michael, that we can kind of talk through. So obviously week 1, and I wanted to start this off with the Tyron Smith versus Nick Bosa matchup. And obviously there's plenty of ones to choose from. It's a star-studded affair, Monday Night Football, prime time, on the road. But for me, it's like, this is your big money free agent. You're going to assume that he's going to be healthy for week 1. He's going up against one of the best pass rushers in all of football. And, to kind of, I guess, get rid of some of the ghosts that you have from last year of the failures to protect Aaron Rodgers in those first 4 plays. Obviously, Rodgers should have gotten rid of the ball. But, like, you brought in this big money left tackle for these types of matchups against premier pass rushers on primetime football. Let's see Tyron Smith. Let's see him protect Aaron Rodgers' blindside. To me, that's kind of the biggest matchup. There's a lot of ones we could have chose for this one, but I think that Smith-Bosa matchup it's going to be very big in determining the Jets' chances of winning this one.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is a stacked matchup on paper. There are a lot of one-on-ones you could have picked in this game, whether it's the Jets corners against their receivers, the Jets linebacker duo against George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey, AVT against their interior D-line. There are so many options, but this is the best edge rusher the Jets are, or they are going to play TJ Watt as well. But, right off the bat, I think, like you said, you get a chance here to immediately feel the impact of having this type of left tackle. And I put out the clips a couple days ago of Tyron Smith when he played against Hassan Reddick last year, and he locked him down. And we know how good of a player Hassan Reddick is. He had 3 sacks against the Cowboys in his 2 games against them last year, but none of those were against Tyron Smith. When he played him, he looked like an absolute jag, just a guy, if you're unfamiliar. So that's a value of having a Tyron Smith. It's a quiet value that you don't necessarily notice play to play in the same way that a superstar receiver might, or a running back or a quarterback. But when the game is over and the superstar edge rusher on the other side did not affect the game, that's when you realize what a Tyron Smith can do. And on primetime in the first game with a quarterback who tore his Achilles in the same spot a year ago, what better opportunity for Tyron Smith to show you what he could do? So Smith versus Bosa, I think, is easily what I'm going to have my eye on the closest for this game.
Yeah, definitely in terms of the Jets offense getting rolling. Like you mentioned the other one that we were about to choose, but we went with the Smith-Bosa. But because I don't think we used Quincy Williams in this list at all, so I think it's important to shout him out. Obviously, the leap that he took last year was incredible. And like you said, that matchup with him guarding Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield on those little option routes, those wheel routes. I think Quincy Williams is among the better linebackers and guarding running backs on those wheel routes the Jets just used to get killed with my entire childhood. They finally have a linebacker that can do it, and they're going to go up against one of the best pass-catching running backs in all football. So that Quincy Williams matchup is another one to keep an eye out for. But I like the Smith-Bosa one. Week 2, kind of different from the Niners in the sense that there's not as many star-studded matchups in this one, but so you could really go anywhere. And I took a swing with this one. Let me know if you agree with it. But I went with the Tittman versus Jeffrey Simmons. I think that Tittman is another guy that you're kind of expecting to take a big leap. He's the starting center going into year 2. I think he played reasonably well last year, but obviously room for improvement. He's going up against one of the best interior defensive linemen in all of football. I just thought when you look across both these rosters, obviously the Jets should be bigger favorites. And I think they're only 3.5-point favorites. I think they should be much bigger favorites when you look at these rosters comparatively. But on the road, week 2, you never know. But I think that when you look at these rosters, I think Tittman versus Jeffrey Simmons opening up that run game, keeping Simmons out of Aaron Rodgers' face. We're about to see, how much pocket mobility Aaron Rodgers still has. I mean, from the clips that we've seen, it seems like he should be okay. I mean, obviously he's 40, but he could be more of a pocket passer than he has been in years past. So limiting that interior pressure right in his face is going to be big. And I think this is a big matchup for Tittman to kind of prove his worth in week 2.
Yeah, looking at this Titans roster, I mean, Jeffrey Simmons stands out as clearly the best player, one of the best defensive tackles in the league. And, Tittman's going to be challenged in week 1 as well, going up against Javon Hargrave, their interior defensive line in San Fran. But this second game, there's not a great edge rush out there in Tennessee. It all revolves around Simmons if they're going to be successful defensively. So I think that puts a lot of pressure on your interior. And obviously that's the guards as well. But I think this is a good game to spotlight Tittman because there's going to be a lot of other people taking attention in that first game. But week 2 here, on the road, young center, going up against one of the star defensive tackles in the league. I really like Tittman as the matchup to focus on in this game. So let's take it to week 3 with the home opener against the Patriots. Right now, this is their biggest favored game of the year at 7.5 points. But like we said, they could win those first 2 games, lose this one to New England for
that would be so. They're 2-0. The stadium's packed.
2-0. Stadium's rocking. Then Drake May beats you, or Jacoby Brissett might still be starting here. Who is a Jets killer the last 2 years?
Well, they got him last
with the
year.
Browns and the Commanders come back last
year.
They
got him back-to-back years. I know he's kind of torn up those defenses though, but they won.
Yes. Well, I mean, when Brissett was on the field with the Commanders, his plus minus, he led them back into the lead. So, but anyway, Patriots here at home.
Plus minus a football stat? Do we count that as a football stat?
It should be. I would be curious. I mean, there's stuff like, yards per carry allowed while you're on the field and all that.
Yeah, you could do it for Jets. You could do it for Jets defensive linemen, especially with how they rotate them.
Right. So anyway, Patriots here in week 3. We chose the Jets' interior defensive line, but specifically Javon Kinlaw against this gap running game of the Patriots. It's caused a lot of trouble for the Jets in recent years. The draw plays, the trap plays, going right up the gut against this attacking defensive line. So I'm going to have my eye on Javon Kinlaw on this one because I trust Quinn Williams to get it done, but Kinlaw is an athletic, attacking defensive tackle who has not been good against the run in his career. So I think the Patriots are going to target him, try to shorten this game with controlling the clock, running the football, and give themselves as good of a chance as they can to get this upset by keeping Aaron Rodgers off the field. So I like Javon Kinlaw specifically against this gap running game. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to pick a single weakness for this Jets defense, it would be the second defensive tackle and down. I mean, I know Solomon Thomas gives you some good depth, and he played better last year, but Kinlaw's a swing. I mean, they paid him double what Quentin Jefferson got, which is really one of the bigger head scratchers they've had all offseason for me because Jefferson I thought was really good and did exactly what they kind of need in that role next to Quentin. But clearly Saul is a big Kinlaw believer. He was in that 49ers building when they drafted him. I think they took him like 13th overall. So he was a top draft pick for them. And clearly Salah sees the potential there. And so he thinks he's getting a diamond in the rough per se. But on paper, Jefferson is a better player and they're paying him half of what the Jets paid Kinlaw. So this is the type of game where it's like you really got to prove it. And like you said, I mean, they have a new offensive coordinator, Alex Van Pelt, but they're going to keep that gap running scheme. It's killed the Jets. I mean, looking at this Pats offensive line, it's certainly not the strongest group in the world. But I could see this as the type of game where if the Jets, even if they're just 1-1, it's the home opener, a lot of energy, and if the Patriots are just able to kind of sit on the ball and take the air out of the crowd, that could really kill the Jets. So the Jets backup interior lineman there, and like all offseason last year, we would like not want to talk about nightmare scenarios because for some reason we don't want to put that out there. But then obviously the worst case scenario happens. So I'm just going to say it. If Quinnen Williams were to go down, that's one of those guys, like obviously best player on the Jets or one of the best players in the Jets. But you look at the room behind him, like that's very thin when you're talking about Lecky Fotu and Javon Kinlaw and Solomon Thomas. Like that's a real potential weak spot for this Jets team is if something were to happen to Quinnen. It is part of the reason why I do think they'll maybe make a move to bring in Calais Campbell or somebody like that to kind of, especially after losing or trading away JFM. I think they'll make some other move to bring in somebody to this interior defensive line. But as it stands right now, Kinlaw, I think you could throw in Fotu and Solomon Thomas. The reserve interior defensive lineman going to be tested early against the Patriots. And then week 4, I mean, obviously, we were tempted to, it's either Zach Wilson's return to MetLife. You could do Zach versus Olbrich's defense, Zach versus this New York crowd. But I think this is a matchup to really highlight Garrett Wilson versus probably the best corner the Jets are going to see all season in Patrick Surtain. I mean, obviously last year, I don't want to say Surtain had his number considering who was at quarterback for the Jets. Obviously Garrett beat him deep down the sideline. I think they missed him. But Surtain did have an interception late. This is a matchup that you really just want to see Garrett take that next step now that he has elite quarterback play and produce against the best corners in the league. If he's able to do that, I think you can really solidify Garrett as a top 5 receiver. And until he does that, you're talking about a great receiver. But until you see him produce against the best, I don't think you can really label him and put him up there with the Justin Jeffersons and with the CeeDee Lambs and guys of that quality. So what do you make of the matchups in this Jets-Broncos game, their second home game in a row?
Yeah, I do think Surtain is the best pick here because I think this is the first game where you really look at it and you see a one-on-one matchup for Garrett Wilson where you're like, okay, he's got to win this one because, the first few, there are different strengths. Like San Francisco's got a lot of defensive strengths. New England does as well. I think offensively it might be the worst offense in the league, but you do have to respect their defense. And then Tennessee, I think they don't have many strengths, and the Jets should win that easily. But then you look at Denver, and I think Surtain is the type of guy who can erase Garrett Wilson and make other people have to beat their defense. So this is the first time. Like Garrett Wilson has played a lot of great corners. He's toasted a lot of them, but he doesn't always get the production to show for it. This is the first time where I think we really get a chance to see, can you cook a guy all game long and do it with production to show for it now that Aaron Rodgers is hopefully at quarterback. So really like Garrett versus Surtain. That's going to be a fun one to watch. The week 5, we take it to London.
Sorry, I have one more. Just to piggyback on
ahead.
what you were saying there. Obviously, Garrett versus Surtain is like the popcorn matchup. But I think this is another important game for Mike Williams because you look at the Broncos' number 2 corner, Levi Wallace. I mean, their secondary falls off a cliff after Surtain. Broncos are obviously very weak in a rebuilding situation, so that's obviously a game the Jets should win. But you look at it as like, occasionally the Jets are going to have matchups where teams are shading safety help to Garrett Wilson. We've seen it Garrett's entire career where they're really, keying in on Garrett Wilson, trying to take him out of the game. And it's like, do the Jets have another weapon to beat defenses? This would be a game where I'd key in on Mike Williams to maybe take advantage of his matchup against Levi Wallace and prove that the Jets have a legitimate receiver number 2. And so that defense is going forward, because remember, this is still early in the season. Going forward, they can't just key in on Garrett and shut down the Jets passing attack. So I think that's an important matchup for the Jets, second and third receivers to really kind of show their competence going forward. But yeah, you were saying week 5, we got the matchup in London, which I got to be honest, I really would like to see a Jets game in London. It's kind of, obviously it's a far trek, and if they lose, it's going to be more devastating. But probably the same amount of time it would take me to get out of MetLife would be to fly out of the UK. But I don't know. I'm considering splurging to go to that. I think that'd be a cool experience. But sorry, take it away, Michael. What's the big matchup to key in on this one, week 5?
Yeah, for this one, we ended up going with Justin Jefferson against not Sauce, but DJ Reed, because I think everyone likes to pinpoint, best receiver versus best corner, and they will see a lot of each other, and it will be a key matchup. But, receivers in the NFL, the majority of them move between both sides of the offense. So against a Jets defense that does not have its corners travel, or at least they haven't done that, but Sauce claims he will be doing more of it. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition. But against this Jets defense that generally doesn't move their corners, both of the outside starters are going to see a lot of Jefferson. So I think Sauce is going to contend with him pretty well, but can DJ Reed be up to the task during his matchups with Justin Jefferson? Because Reed has been great with the Jets, but he's had some down games, I think, especially against the upper competition they played. Like he really struggled against Miami last year. So I think he is going to be the X factor in this one, more so than Sauce.
Yeah, I mean, and Vikings have a great receiving core as well with Jordan Addison as well. So I mean, that's definitely
Yes,
the
it
DB
really
versus,
is a 1-2 punch. So both of them, any player, are going to be challenged.
So the Jets obviously elected not to have their bye week 6 after the international trip, which the NFL gives them the option to. They take it later, which I think is the right call. They get an extra day of rest, Monday Night Football, the rematch. And I will say, when the Jets, I think this was before the schedule came out, they did that video where the social admin was asking different players, who do they want to play week 1 or who do you think they'll play week 1? And I think like 90% of the team said the Bills. So it's very clear who the players see as their main rival. It's just kind of funny because I know Jets fans who are maybe just slightly older than me see the Dolphins as the team they hate the most because obviously they grew up with Marino. I grew up with Brady. Both you and I grew up with Brady and Belichick. So the Patriots to me are the Jets' biggest rival, but now it seems like it's kind of shifting into the Bills. And so it's, it's just kind of cool to see them go throughout the entire AFC East, but clearly the players see this as their big matchup. I was tempted to put Michael Clemens and Deion Dawkins here, but I think really the big matchup is CJ Mosley. I mean, you can include Quincy Williams in here as well, but I think it's CJ Mosley versus Josh Allen. And the reason I'd say that is you look at the Jets matchups, the last 4 matchups against Josh Allen, the first 3, they did very well against Allen. They were really able to shut him down, take the ball away. He had really no answers for this Jets 4-man pass rush. He was turning the ball over like crazy. But their last matchup that they just had in Buffalo, I think, and it was with Joe Brady, who's their current offensive coordinator now, I think you really saw kind of a different approach from Josh Allen. He really played it conservatively, more so than any other game last year. He really keyed in on death by a million paper cuts, taking the underneath stuff. The Bills were running the ball against the Jets and just taking those 4, 5, 6-yard passes. They were able to hit the big one to Khalil Shakir, and obviously that was like a 70-yard touchdown, but that wasn't a 9 route. I think it was like It was like a 15-yard dig route, and he was just able to get the yak. So They really prioritized the underneath stuff, throwing to the running backs. They had 6 completions for like 76 yards and 2 touchdowns to running backs in the last Jets game that they had. So I think that Mosley, Allen, chess match at the line of scrimmage. Mosley's, the captain of this Jets defense, in charge of making all those checks at the line of scrimmage. I'll throw Quincy in there because he's more their coverage linebacker. He's going to be on those running backs. But I think that Mosley-Allen chess match at that line of scrimmage and controlling the underneath passing attack of the Bills is really what's going to decide whether or not the Jets, win this game or not. Only 1.5-point favorites, but it's nice to see the Jets. I'm seeing a lot of. We have the betting lines and all these in our list here, and it's nice to see a lot of minuses. That's pretty cool. But do you have any other matchups in this one? I mean, obviously there's a second game, so we'll get to that. But I don't know if there's any other ones that jump out to you against the Bills.
Well, I love this one. You brought this one up initially because that's true. That is the way that Allen figured out the Jets is starting to be more conservative, relying on his playmakers. You brought up the stat. I mean, the running backs killed him in the passing game in that Buffalo game. 2 touchdowns through the air, one of them by Jets legend Ty Johnson. So if Allen's going to be successful against the Jets, it's going to be that way. So linebackers got to be ready to cover those running backs out of the backfield. But I also think, the main storyline of this matchup is going to be Deion Dawkins now because of all his yapping throughout the offseason. So I would say we're going to pick him for another one later. So I still agree with our initial pick of Mosley and Quincy against Josh Allen, but Hassan Reddick against Deion Dawkins, come out Monday Night Football, crowd's going to be hyped, beat him for a strip sack. He gets chippy. You draw roughing a post play penalty on him, get the crowd riled up. I think there's a great opportunity for one of the edge rushers to set the tone on.
Yeah, all of them. Yeah, no, I mean, he definitely put a giant target on his back. He's still talking about the Jets. So that Jets defensive lineman is going to be talking about him all week. I think the noise there'll be some headlines that week. It's primetime football. And like you said, I think Michael Clemens is going to want to get his back after they had the altercation. By the way, can we just, I don't think we've ever talked about it. Why did the Bills have both teams going in the same tunnel? I mean, how poor is that? I know they're
Yeah,
redesigning or they're doing a new stadium or whatever, but that's like the worst
right.
stadium design of all time. Anyway, let's go to week 7, another primetime game. And I have to say, because this schedule leaked before it was official, and I was driving to work and Michael was reading to me on the phone, and I was like, why
Yeah,
would they have a Steelers game and a Colts game on primetime? But it is cool. The 2 AFC championship losses from
yeah. This is the
our
first
glory
one that made you
days.
skeptical as to whether the
I was like,
leak
God, is
was
that real?
was real.
Prime time at, I was going to say at Heinz Field. Was it Acrisure Stadium now? Something lame.
I think so.
Um, Sunday
Much
Night
worse than
Football.
Heinz, that's for sure.
Yes. Sunday Night Football. And we have 2 here. I'll start with mine and then you can get into yours. I was just saying to Michael that this is one of those games to me where it's like it's primetime football. They've had, they have the travel to the UK, then they got to come back and play an emotional game on primetime football against the Bills, and then another primetime football game on the road against a tough team. It's always hard to win in Pittsburgh. You're going up against, whether it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, a mobile quarterback who just extends plays. Like, this to me seems like the type of game where the Jets are a little fatigued. Maybe they come out a little flat and it's just like, can we just get him? Get him. Like, it's Fields or Wilson extending plays and being frustrating. And the Steelers have overhauled their offensive line in the last couple of years. Obviously, the bookend tackles, Broderick Jones, Troy Fatanu, assuming that they're going to play him out at tackle. They drafted Zach Frazier. So, they have a solid offensive line, and we've seen that's kind of the one thing that's given this Jets defense some trouble is when they can't win with 4. So this is a really big game for the Jets to just be able to win with 4. If this defensive line's wreaking havoc with 4, I do not fear the Steelers at all. But if it's one of those things where they come out a little flat, they can't get pressure, whether it's Fields or Wilson's extending plays, they're running the ball. Like, this is one of those sneaky, I don't want to call it a trap game because the Steelers are always hard, but a game that you think the Jets should win that they might not. But you put another matchup in here.
Yeah, for me, I mean, we talked about Nick Bosa in week 1 against Tyron Smith. This is the other all-world edge rusher that you're playing against, and it's basically the anchor of this whole team, TJ Watt. I mean, when they've not had him, the whole team is falling apart, but when they have, they figure out how to scratch out these close games, and it's often because of the big plays that this guy makes at the end of the game. So TJ Watt, he plays all of his snaps on the left side of the D-line, so that means this is the game for Morgan Moses to step up the biggest. He'll have plenty of great matchups throughout the season, but TJ Watt's going to be his guy in this game. He's got to step up. And you know what? One of these games could be Olu who's in there. Like, we don't know when or if he's going to come in. I mean, hopefully he doesn't. We don't want people to get hurt. But odds are he will.
Yeah.
So,
and especially
he's going to get tested.
If it's Moses who goes down, you'd assume they keep Tyron Smith at left tackle, but Smith has plenty of experience at right tackle. He played right tackle when Tyler Smith had moved to left tackle because Smith had been hurt. So he has a lot more right tackle experience than Olu. Obviously, Olu is going to get both reps at right tackle and left tackle. So you'd assume if Moses goes down, it would be Olu at right tackle. But if it were to happen this week, this game, that Moses goes down with a short-term injury, I wonder if the Jets would say, hey, you know what, TJ Watt, he lines up on the left side a lot. Maybe let's move Tyron Smith over there in his matchup. I don't know. Seems like maybe you want to keep Smith protecting Rodgers' blind side, but if Olu's significantly better and more comfortable on the left side, maybe that's the best route for the Jets. Then week 8, finishing up their matchups with the Patriots. They're on the road, 4.5-point favorites here. A lot of options you could go with here. We obviously went with the interior defensive line. Their first matchup. This one we went with the safeties, because I think at this point they could be playing Drake May, rookie quarterback, opportunity for a lot of turnovers, and specifically Tony Adams. Like, this is a game for Tony Adams to really take a next step, turn into I don't want to call him a ball hawk because I don't think he has really proven to be that yet, but this is the type of game where he could get an interception or two. He's going to have matchups, man coverage matchups, potentially with Hunter Henry. We'll see which safeties get those matchups. And also, Tony Adams, one of the things that he struggled with last year that you'd like to see him improve on is his tackling. And again, this is one of those games where it's like, Stevenson could get going, yards after the catch of these Patriots receivers. If Adams is able to, if Adams is having a bad game, I guess more so than a good game, if he's missing tackles or blowing coverages, he could really hurt the Jets in this game. So I figured, why not highlight Tony Adams, somebody who's kind of flown under the radar that needs to take a big step in year 2 or year 3.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, like, looking at this one compared to the home game, I just felt like, And Drake may, by this point in the season, this could be when he comes in. Maybe this is his first home start or one of his first few home starts. Could be playing confidently, taking some shots. So an opportunity for the safeties to make some big plays. But short week and yet another primetime game. The third out of fourth out of five, if you want to include the Vikings game. So people are going to see plenty of the Jets around the country here in this midseason, which usually they complain about, but hopefully we give them a reason
We'll be
not to.
distracted by how
Uh,
good the Jets uniforms look. They,
exactly.
yeah.
At least it'll be enjoyable to look at, regardless of what the people wearing the uniforms are doing. You'll be just glad to see them. But Texans here in Week 9. Jets blew them out last year. Going to try to do it again. In this one, I chose, and you chose a different one that I also love, but I went with the edge duo, or really, let's say all the edge rushers: Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, Hassan Reddick versus Laramie Tunsil, one of the best pass blocking left tackles in the league, one of the few guys on the level or close to a Tyron Smith. Uh, if he can keep CJ Stroud clean and give him time to scan these weapons that he's got, I mean, one of the deepest receiver groups in the league, if not the deepest, it's going to be tough for these Jets corners, as good as they are. So they're going to have to create that pressure, which is what they did last year to dominate him. They're going to have to get that pressure, and Laramie Tunsil is a brick wall, so you got to be able to get past him and make plays.
Yeah, I went with, and I thought about putting him for week 1. I was considering using the Aaron Rodgers versus Fred Warner matchup because, that's always going to be a chess match. And really, Aaron Rodgers is their most important player in all these games. But I think the matchup, and obviously this isn't a direct matchup, but the matchup of Aaron Rodgers versus CJ Stroud. Stroud's going to be one of the better quarterbacks the Jets face this year, maybe even the best quarterback. At the very least, this is one of the best offenses the Jets are going to face. And so on a short week, primetime football, maybe the Jets defense isn't as dominant this week. CJ Stroud going to be looking for revenge. Obviously, he's going to have his weapons back, plus Stephon Diggs. So this might be one of those games where the Jets need to be in a little bit of a shootout. And in years past, when you have Zach Wilson or Sam Darnold or whoever else is at quarterback, they haven't really been able to do it. But this is why you have an Aaron Rodgers. This is why you go trade for him, to have a prime quarterback versus a Hall of Fame quarterback, primetime football, shootout, keep him in the game. To me, this is like one of those games where Aaron Rodgers is going to have to kind of maybe carry the offense a little bit and keep him in this one. And so, yeah, I went with Rodgers versus Stroud. I don't know if you have anything else in that matchup before we move to Week 10, but God, it gets me excited thinking about all these
game
matchups.
where Aaron Rodgers just really has to show out, and you look at this
Yeah.
like a passing of the torch moment, like some of those late Mahomes Brady matchups that we got,
or like you had with Sam Darnold in 2018.
Yeah, that did feel like that was the best game that Darnold played. It's still one of the best quarterback performances we've seen from a Jets quarterback, at least in the time I've been watching. He's on fire at the end of that 2018 season. That had me bought in. So, unfortunately, was not a sign of things to come. But the Jets, Week 10, going to Arizona, a game that you and I both expect to be at. We went with Jermaine Johnson against Kyler Murray in this one. I mean, Jermaine Johnson gives you a great motor, great range on the edge. He's an amazing athlete, has great length, and he's shown the ability to be a playmaker outside the pocket. So against Kyler Murray, who is going to extend plays and use his legs, I think you want to focus on, mainly trying to contain him, but he's sometimes going to be able to get outside the pocket. And you need someone who could run with him, put some pressure on him outside of the pocket. And I think Jermaine Johnson is your mobile quarterback stopper.
Yeah, I was trying to think of another matchup. That's very clearly the matchup. I mean, you could throw Will McDonald in there as well. I mean, even Hassan Reddick. I mean, all of them have the athleticism.
I think he could be good in that same area too.
Yeah, and I am curious to see how much the Jets get versatile with their usage of Reddick, especially if McDonald takes a big leap. When you're in these situations against really hypermobile quarterbacks and maybe they're in desperation mode, maybe the Jets are out on a lead a little bit. Like, how creative do they get with having JJ McDonald and Reddick on the field all at the same time, given that Reddick has some stand-up versatility and can be kind of your QB spy. Obviously, we saw the Jets do that with JJ, where they'd stand him up and line him up, just outside of Quinn Williams' shoulder. So I'm just curious to see, how Week 10, back half of the season, that's typically when you might see some more exotic looks. And I think this is one where you can really see Jeff Ulbrich have some fun with his defensive lineman. I'm trying to think of another one, honestly, for this game. I mean, yeah, obviously like Marvin Harrison Jr. versus the Sauce, but I don't know if I want to throw that in there. I kind of feel like this is I don't know enough about the Cardinals safeties to say this. This to me seems like a sneaky Tyler Conklin type of game. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because we haven't used him yet. But just another Jets weapon. I mean, really, I have no reason for that outside we haven't used him. But
I mean, I like how you brought up Hassan Reddick, throwing him into
yeah,
the group of potential Murray stoppers. Really, like with that whole group of Jermaine, McDonald, Reddick, the Jets are built to contend with these mobile quarterbacks now, and that's something that they've struggled a lot with at some points during this playoff drought. But I think with this group, they really have the ability to run with some of these mobile quarterbacks, and that's one thing with JFM being traded. It's a loss. I don't like the trade. They're going to miss him. But I do think one area where he kind of lacked when he was on the edge is that mobile quarterbacks were able to get outside of him pretty easily. Because for an edge rusher at 280, that's just a downside of being
yeah.
that big at that position. So playing contain and, he was able to contain guys well, but once they got outside of him, he just wasn't able to keep up with them. So now they have this group full of speed guys. That is something that I think they should be able to improve at.
All right, going into their last on-scheduled primetime game, another surprising one. I think it's the Colts' only primetime game of the season, Sunday Night Football. It was tough deciding a matchup for this one. I mean, the Colts, part of the reason I thought they did this is because they felt like, Anthony Richardson showed a lot in those early weeks before he got injured. If he is a really exciting young pick, I mean, obviously the Colts would get flexed into maybe some more primetime games, maybe a game against the Texans, but they looked at their matchup and they said, hey, the Jets at home, they're an exciting team that we apparently haven't had enough of. We'll give the Colts this matchup, and then maybe if Anthony Richardson turns out to be something, this could be quite the matchup. You look at this and you expect the Jets, they're 4-point favorites. You expect the Jets to have pretty much every advantage. But hey, you never know. If Richardson is really good, this is a matchup that I think, again, you could highlight the Jets defensive lineman and containing him in the pocket. But Michael, you gave an interesting one. I'll let you take the baton on this one because you made the pitch to me on why this should be Sauce Gardner versus Michael Pittman and the Colts receivers. We haven't used Sauce yet. We kind of used him a little bit with the Vikings. Why do you think Sauce versus Pittman is the big matchup of this game?
Well, I think people like to single out the corners when you're playing a great receiver, and for good reason. Like, obviously, you're playing a great receiver. You want your corners to step up and shut him down. But I think it's also important for your star corner to assert himself when you're playing a wide receiver unit that isn't as great. And Michael Pittman is a really good player, but I think he's not quite on the caliber of some of the other receivers that they're playing on the schedule. And it's less about him and more the fact that the depth beyond him on this Colts receiver unit is not that great. So I think you're going to come into this game. The Jets are going to be playing at home against.
Although there is now, I'm sure A.D. Mitchell has seen the clip of Joe Douglas in the draft room going, "Oh, the Colts drafted A.D. Mitchell? Right. Yes!" I'm sure. I could see A.D. Mitchell maybe being a little motivated for that Jets game. So I think the Colts,
which he could try extra hard on his routes, and he could slip, and that could give Sauce Gardner an interception opportunity. But my point being here is I think this is very advantageous for the Jets at home, essentially a rookie quarterback, a receiver group that it has potential. It's not terrible, but it's one of the lesser groups on the schedule. I think this is a chance for Sauce to really assert himself, and I think make some big plays. Maybe by this point in the season, he'll have already done that. He'll have 3 interceptions or whatever, but I like his chances of taking control of this game.
Yeah, and then week 12, the Jets get their bye. Perfectly timed, but I think week 12, anywhere from like week 11 to 13, I think is a great bye right before you get into that final home stretch of games that you're going to need to, secure a playoff berth, maybe even the division, depending on how good things are going. But a nice timed bye, although I will say, and this bleeds right into our next one, week 13, home against the Seahawks. Saleh hasn't had great luck after the bye. He's 1-2, but really should be 0-3 with how they played against the Giants last year. So obviously the Jets have a chance to get healthy that week 12 bye. But you look at, I think this is one that I think, maybe this is cheating or whatever, but I'm gonna say Salah is really the one. You could do Salah versus the bye week, or hell,
Yeah.
even Salah just versus the Seahawks. Obviously, he came up the ranks coaching for the Seahawks. They killed him in a must-win game. They killed his defense in 2022 at the end of the season there. And if you remember, the Jets were still kind of alive for the playoffs, and that's really what put the nail in the coffin of their season there. And then, yeah, just having his team prepared at home against a team traveling from the West Coast. I mean, that's very much a game that the Jets should win. They're 4.5-point favorites. We'll see how good the Seahawks are this year. I mean, they're kind of a team that could go either way, but they seem to always be in the thick of things, battling for a wild card spot. So that's a team that's going to be desperate for a win on the road, traveling east. I mean, you hope that the Jets can come out there and really kick off the back third of their season on a good note. But what do you think about the Salah versus bye week or Salah versus Seahawks matchup for week 13? Any other ones jump out to you?
Yeah, I love this one because it's a great opportunity for Salah to show some improvement as a coach. And we'll see what their record is by this point. I mean, how many games have they played by this point? 11 games. So if they're 10-1, I don't think we'll be questioning him too much. But, coming out of the bye, I think is a big uh, point where coaches get targeted. And Jets have been awful coming out of byes under Salah. So big opportunity for him. But in terms of matchups on the field, I got one. How about Mike Williams against Tariq Woolen? I mean, that
Okay.
could be as lengthy and big of a receiver corner matchup as you can get. And I think Mike Williams has a chance to make some big vertical plays on him. Tariq Woolen makes his big plays, but he's a gambler and he'll get beat over the top every now and then in exchange for those plays. So I think we have another game. Actually, no, we actually did not pick Mike Williams for any of these games. So
Well, I threw
if
him
we
in
don't
there
want
a
to go
little bit at,
solid
at the
versus bye week,
Broncos.
we'll go with Mike Williams here, I guess.
Yeah, and this is also the part of the season. I mean, you're hoping that you can do it as early as week one, but then maybe you start throwing Malachi Corley into some of these matchup
Yeah.
conversations. Obviously, again, you're hoping that he's a day one slot receiver starter for the Jets and he's making an impact or whatever. But you're assuming at worst week 13 against the Seahawks. I mean, that last stretch heading into the playoffs is really where you're hoping that he can, maybe have added some nuance to his route running, learn the finer details of the offense, and is making more of an impact. So I think that's another spot you could have chose Corley there going up against. I know they have Witherspoon on the outside. I don't know if it's going to be him or Michael Jackson or whoever lining up in their slot, but I like that Mike Williams pick there as well. I loved your pick for this one, and I'll give you all the credit for this one, but we haven't used him. It's a pretty obvious one, but Breece Hall. Breece Hall against this Dolphins defense. I mean, you're talking about going down to Miami, the last stretch of the season. This is really an opportunity for the Jets, who have struggled the last two matchups against the Dolphins offense, to control the clock, give the ball to Breece, keep the Dolphins offense on the sideline, and let Breece feast. So what do you think about Breece Hall versus this Dolphins defense? Which I got to be honest, on paper, I'm looking at this Dolphins defense, not very intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, Brees Hall is going to be important in every game the Jets play, but this was the one that stood out to me as a great opportunity to choose him for the key matchup because, I look at we're getting late in the season here, and I know we're in Miami, so this isn't
Yeah.
a cold weather game necessarily, but Jets have struggled in Miami the past few years. I feel like as long as the Dolphins are at home in good weather, they're going to put up points. So to win this game, I think the Jets are going to have to keep pace with them and win a shootout. So to do that, I think you're going to need explosive plays. And where do you get that from? You get it from Breece Hall. So against this Miami defense, I think they're going to struggle against the run. I mean, they were a solid run defense last year, but they lost Christian Wilkins, who was the anchor of that defense for them on the interior. He went off to, I believe, Vegas. So I could see them struggling on run defense, especially up the middle, by the time we get to this game. And I think with the Jets being that power running type of team, I think Brees powering up the middle, making big plays to allow the Jets to stick with them in a shootout, control the clock, maybe keep them off the field. I think this is a game where Brees Hall running the football, high volume of carries, high efficiency, really gives them a chance to keep up with an elite offense on the other side of the field. So I see him having a lot of great games, but if there's one where you really want to have it, I like this one.
That takes us week 15, staying in Florida. Do you think they'll do the thing where they just stay the week in Florida because they play in
I don't,
Jacksonville, or do you think they'll
nah,
fly up to Jersey
same
and come back
coast.
down?
I think that's more if you're going
More of a
West
West
Coast,
Coast thing?
right? Yeah.
Probably. Well, they're at Jacksonville. And again, you chose this one, and I thought it was a great pick because we were thinking about that 2022 matchup against the Jags, and obviously 2 years in between them, so things have changed. But I was like, who killed him in that game? Because I was there. It was just probably the most I mean, I went to the Seeing Ghost game, so that was the most miserable experience I've had at a game. But second would be that Jaguars Thursday Night Football game, and you mentioned Evan Ingram killing the Jets in this one, and the matchup with Chuck Clark, who we could have used earlier against the Patriots. Originally, we actually had Clark in that, but I think Clark against Ingram. One of the reasons we really loved the Chuck Clark trade last year was his ability to go man coverage and line up against tight ends.
Yeah.
And Evan Ingram, one of the better receiving tight ends in all football. You look at that Jaguars receiving depth chart, obviously losing Calvin Ridley, replacing him with Gabe Davis. Trevor Lawrence has chemistry with Evan Ingram. Ingram's going to be their matchup piece this year. I expect him to have a big year. And Clark, if he's able to bring that X factor, being able to go man coverage against some of the better tight ends in all football, it makes this Jets defense that much better than they already were. I mean, they were doing it with Jordan Whitehead and Tony Adams, and Quincy Williams is good too. But if Clark is able to at least revert back to 90% of what he was in Baltimore in man coverage situations, I think this is one of those matchups that could really boost this Jets defense. So, is there any other ones that stand out to you? And you can take the baton on the Clark matchup as well if you want.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that Jets game 2 years ago. It was those Ingram shallow passes that were really killing them, and that's still a big part of the Jaguars offense. I mean, Ingram last season, I just pulled this up, most slot targets out of any tight end in the league, 85 of them. That's 61% of all the targets he had. So he's almost a slot receiver, essentially. And Chuck Clark, one of his greatest strengths is covering tight ends out of the slot in his career. 4 yards per target, 63 passer rating, 10 completions on 25 targets. It's one of the greatest strengths in his game, and it could be one of the biggest improvements for this Jets defense because Jordan Whitehead can't cover people. 7 touchdowns allowed last year, most among safeties. It was the biggest weakness in this
one more parting shot at Jordan Whitehead before.
There will be more of them as Chuck Clark plays well. We'll just be able to compare that and say, like, this is the improvement that we're getting in this defense.
You know what's funny is I sat right in front of
Yeah.
Jordan Whitehead's mom and family at that Jaguars game. And I think he was just getting cooked by Evan Ingram.
Oh, wow.
And
And you were just I can't wait until 2 years when Chuck Clark and his slot coverage stats come into play. But
yes.
But yeah, it's not to like just throw shots at him. It's more just to show that because the Jets defense lost a lot of important pieces. So I think you're trying to look for ways you could make up for that lost impact. And I think you look at the holes in this defense last year, and Clark gives you a very clear avenue to improving on some of the few areas where the Jets defense struggled last year. So his slot coverage against tight ends is really good. Evan Ingram is heavily used out of the slot as any tight end in the league. So that's the matchup right there.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of slot targets and slot coverage, how about Michael Carter II, really the unheralded third musketeer of this Jets corner unit? And going up against the Rams, I mean, they're going to give plenty of slot reps to Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. I think that's a great matchup for Michael Carter II, and really the biggest swing matchup in terms of the Jets. The Rams have to, again, travel from the West all the way to the East, and towards the end of the season, we'll see how they're shaping up in terms of the playoff picture. Obviously, the Stafford-Rodgers matchup might get top billing, but it's really going to come down to Michael Carter II's dominance. If he's healthy and he's out there on the field and he's taking away those slot targets from Puka and Kupp, I think you feel really good about the Jets' chances of winning this one. Conversely, if MC2's injured and you got Brandon Eccles out there, I think you're going to see Stafford and McVay motion Cooper Kupp, motion Puka Kupp, or Puka Nacua, sorry, and give them, yeah, I know. Well, I'm sure I'm not the first to make that mistake. And give them advantageous matchups all over the field. So I think that's one where Michael Carter II's real dominance as a nickel corner could really shine in that matchup. And you kind of mentioned Reed versus Michael Carter II. We've talked about it a couple times in this podcast. They're going to have a decision to make at the end of the year. And if I'm choosing one of these guys to keep, I'm keeping Michael Carter II. I think in terms of his position, he's more dominant than Reed is. Both of them are great. I love DJ Reed. But this is really an opportunity for Michael Carter II in a contract year to make a statement and win this game for the Jets. So I love that matchup week 16.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the Rams, if they're going to win games this year, it's going to have to be offensive because, I mean, they lost Aaron Donald. I look at this defense, it doesn't really pop off the screen to me. They're going to rely on a couple of rookies for their pass rush, Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, which, if it works out, it works out. The upside is there, but generally, you don't think rookies are going to produce too well. So I think the Rams are going to try to win via shootouts this year. If they're going to come into MetLife and win, it's going to be high scoring. So this is where Michael Carter II can really make his money as he aims to get a contract extension, hopefully after this season. Go against two of the best slot receivers in the league on the same team.
All right, week 17, 2 rematches left for the Jets, both divisional games, staying in the Northeast, going up to Buffalo, which I was kind of hoping this matchup would maybe be earlier in the schedule. That's one of the few things I look at when this, well, not one of the few, one of the many things I look at when the schedule comes out is how late is the Buffalo game and how early is the Dolphins game. Because the later the Dolphins game, the better, which it's week 14, great for the Jets. But the earlier the Bills game, the less we can, I love snow games for the aesthetics, but I'd rather not play Buffalo in Buffalo in January. And that's what the Jets are going to have to do this year. They've done it a couple of times this year, or a couple of times the last few years. You're assuming it's going to be snowy. At the very least, it's going to be Arctic, frigid temperatures with potentially, playoff implications, division implications on the line. And I love our pick for this one. And we went with the two guards, AVT, assuming, let's see if we can make it to the end of the season this time around. And John Simpson, the other guy that they added from Baltimore, going up against this Bills defensive line. You highlighted Ed Oliver. And I'm going to throw in two other guys here because, I think I love the guard play because we're thinking like it's a cold, gritty game. The Jets are going to have to run the football. These guards need to be able to create lanes and get those 4 or 5 yard runs consistently. But I'll throw in Braylon Allen in this one as well. Breece Hall, obviously.
Nice. Yeah.
But I'll throw Braylon Allen and maybe even Isaiah Davis, just depending on which one is better. I think it's going to be Allen out of the two of them. We've had time to now watch those guys. I'm slightly higher on Davis than I was after the draft. I will be honest. Blewett's review clips that he's been posting on Twitter have helped that narrative. But at the very least, I love this Braylon Allen pick when they made it. And after getting a chance to watch more of him, I'm really, really excited about what the Jets did. And I think when you look at all their moves they made on the offensive side of the ball, bringing in those two guys from Baltimore, Morgan Moses and John Simpson, bringing in Tyron Smith, he adds into this, drafting Malachi Corley, drafting these two big running backs. The Jets clearly want to send a message of the type of team they want to be. And you're hoping that attitude, that big, tough, we're going to run you over style of football pays dividends when you're here in week 17 at Buffalo. So to me, it's that guard play. And it's also like, whether Breece Hall is healthy and you're trying to not have him take 40 reps in the snow like he did week 18 against the Patriots, or maybe, right, God forbid, Breece Hall is hurt and Braylon Allen or Davis is your starting running back. Really, let's highlight the big guys in the trenches and on this offense to win a matchup in frigid Buffalo. Any other matchups stand out to you?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say I agree wholeheartedly with that because this is going to be a big part of this offense. It really seems like they want to be more downhill, and the guards are at the center of that. So snowy Buffalo, let's shout out AVT and John Simpson, especially even in pass protection. Ed Oliver is a very good pass rushing defensive tackle, so they'll be key in pass protection as well against him. But other than that, second Bills game here. Just thinking back to the Jets' last few trips, really the last 4 games in Buffalo. It's been the offense that's struggled more than the defense. I feel like they've had their moments defensively, so more so looking at the offense. You mentioned the running backs. That's a great one, but we haven't really talked about Tyler Conklin. You brought him up in Arizona, but I think this is a spot here where it could be snowy weather. Maybe you're not attacking aggressively down the field too much. You're looking for those crossers, slant routes, that short passing game. Tyler Conklin, maybe this is a game where he makes a huge impact and leads the Jets in receiving out of nowhere. So I think that's an interesting player to highlight here.
Yeah, I will say, like you said, the Jets offense has had little to no success in Buffalo the last few years, but Rodgers is a guy coming from Lambeau. He's used to playing in those cold, frigid temperatures.
Right.
I don't think the Jets are going to have to deal with what they've had to deal with Zach Wilson, where they have to just scale back the offense to an almost unwatchable extent. Um,
Right.
so I think the Jets will. I think Conklin's a good guy to highlight, take advantage of the Bills losing their safeties in free agency. And again, I'll shout him out again because we didn't give him a specific one. But again, another Malachi Corley type of game. If the weather is that bad, and even if it's not, this is the type of game where you really want a guy who can bring you that yak, that you can throw those little bubble screens or those little instant microwave offenses. If it's gusting winds and you can't throw a 15-yard out route to Garrett Wilson, maybe a little funnel screen to Corley and turn that into 15 yards. That's the type of offense you're going to need in this situation. So, and that takes us to the last game of the season. Finally, the Jets closing their season at home for the first time since 2016. The Dolphins. Let me paint the picture for you, Michael, because at the very least, you're hoping that there's some sort of ramifications, whether it's a playoff berth, maybe a divisional berth. I mean, hey, maybe this is Tyrod Taylor. Maybe the Jets have already clinched a division or a playoff berth, but let's just say there's some sort of ramification on the line. Maybe this is flexed to primetime Sunday Night Football, 14-year playoff drought, at home, fans packing the stands, Miami having to travel up north to play the Jets, division, whatever, playoffs on the line. What's the difference maker in this game, Michael? What's the X factor in this game, which is, 8 months away that we have no way of predicting, but we're going to try anyway in May? What's going to make the difference?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of options that we could have went with here, but I think it comes down to this. In what we are projecting to be the biggest game of the season, I think you need your best player to step up. And there are a lot of players on this team who now have that case to be the best player on the team. But I think the best player on this team, relative to their position, I think it's Quinnen Williams. And there's other guys who can go with Sauce. I think it's a great case. 2-time first-team All-Pro. But I think Quinnen and his two-way impact on this defense makes him the most impactful player for his position on the team. And hopefully Rodgers can exceed that. There are other guys again. But Quinnen Williams here, I think you're at home against the Dolphins. We know this team struggles in cold weather. Miami does late in the season. So I think you can trust more so than the Week 14 game in Miami that this is going to be a lower scoring game. And I think that's where you want your best defensive player to step up and really contain them defensively, make some big plays to turn this in the Jets' favor. And then also that Miami running game, I think they're going to try to establish more so here, perhaps than in the previous matchup, which can be prolific. Their run game at times last year was awesome, especially really it was the entire season. It was one of the best in the league. So I think they're going to try to lean on that here later in the season, try to set up that passing game better instead of relying on it so heavily. So I think Quinnen in the run game is going to have to be the guy to shut that down. And then in the passing game, can he make a big play here or there on primetime, potentially a strip sack or a forced fumble to turn this in the Jets' favor and put them in an advantageous position early on. So I got my eyes on Quinnen for this Week 18 potential division championship.
Yeah, I mean, the division championship we're predicting in May. I think, there's all sorts of places you can go. You mentioned that Reed kind of struggled a little bit against the Dolphins receivers. They brought in Odell Beckham Jr. We'll see how good he is. But really, it's Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So the Jets DBs versus their receivers is obviously a huge matchup. I think if we're calling this a matchup, Aaron Rodgers versus Tua Tagovailoa, but specifically from Aaron's perspective, it's like if playoffs are on the line, this is really why you traded for him, to go win these big time games against division opponent, which is, in this scenario would essentially be a playoff game. I think you feel pretty good about the Jets offense this year against the Dolphins defense. It's just going to come down to Saleh versus McDaniel and that or Ulbrich versus McDaniel in that chess match. I think Quinnen's a great pick. I think the Miami Dolphins running game doesn't get talked about enough. I think people focus on the receivers, but they really came to life last year. And, that's really what killed the Jets in their two matchups is they were able to get those chunk gains on the ground, and that would open up their play action game. And so if Quinnen's disrupting that, or, again, you could throw in Javon Kinlaw here as well, but really Quinnen and creating that interior pressure too when they go those play action looks. yeah, your best player you want in the biggest moments. And I think you made a great case for Quinnen in that one. Well, there you have it. That is the Jets 2024 schedule. Obviously, you can comment or tweet us what you think are some of the biggest matchups from the season. Obviously, there's plenty that we didn't touch on. And as I said, we could be talking about Quinnen Williams in Week 18, and he might not even be healthy for Week 18. So this is maybe all a moot point. But I think it's a good way to kind of break down the schedule. All I'll say is this. Before we do the plugs, get out of here, maybe 2 minutes of uniform talk. We did a little bit at the beginning, but just kind of your overall thoughts on the schedule the Jets have and kind of just your takeaways after we've gone through each one of these matchups. Kind of just anything stand out to you after doing this exercise?
I mean, always when the schedule comes out, I just try to not be so specific with like, here's the stretch where they need to win this many games. This is the hard stretch where you just want to tread water here because you just don't know who's going to be better than expected, who's not. But the biggest thing that I've really taken away, now that we have the whole slate, you can see the order of the games. Again, we knew who they were going to play. But once you see it all laid out, it is fun to just picture it. Exactly how we just went through it, just seeing that whole storyline of the season. It's still fun to like watch it, picture it playing out in your mind. So just doing all that, the biggest thing I've taken away is, why can't the Jets win 11 games? Why can't they win 12? Screw it. Why can't they win 13? Why not? That's my legitimate question. And I actually wrote an article answering that exact question recently. But if the Jets are healthy, I know it's a big if, and there are a lot of injury concerns in this team, but who wants to predict injuries and assume that's going to happen? Assuming they don't, like, what's preventing where are the 6 games the Jets are?
Well, you wrote an article about that, Michael.
11-6 is ambitious. Where are the 7 games the Jets are losing on the schedule? Where's the 7 losses? Even if I'll say 8, that's just absurd to me. Even
if they really, you give them the worst case scenarios, like Garrett Wilson getting hurt or Quinnen Williams getting hurt, or it's like, yeah, this team is good and deep enough. Even their Super Bowl hopes will go down the drain if Rodgers goes down. But even with Tyrod Taylor, this team could make the playoffs as a wild card. You're hoping at the very least that if that were to happen, it wouldn't be on the 4th play of the season. But like, yeah, you look at this team and there's, even with the injury concerns, they're deeper than a lot of people give them credit for. You did have that, and maybe we'll do a podcast on that later, but you did, like, outside of injuries, what are some things that could derail this Jets season? We almost did that today, and we're like, maybe that's a little depressing to be our first podcast in a couple weeks. But yeah, like, find 8 losses on the schedule, and it's pretty hard, But, the Jets have surprised us before, and maybe coaching is a matchup we maybe should have talked about a little bit more. Obviously, we did it for that Seahawks game, but we'll see. I'm so jacked for this season. We've said it a number of times in this podcast, but January, I was really feeling like, man, obviously I love doing this podcast. I'm grateful to have it, but I was just like, I do not want to talk about the Jets right now. Like, I was just so, and I know you felt similarly. You have to write articles all the time, and it's just like 2023 was just so demoralizing. But I have to say, between free agency, the new uniforms, that counts, the draft, and now even just seeing the schedule, I'm fully ready to get my heart broken again. So with that said, you can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter, Michael_Nania, myself, Ben W. Blessington. Go to jetsxfactor.com, which is the best place to go for Jets content. Make sure you check out the other JetX pods that are sometimes more consistent than us. I think that's it. Rate, review, subscribe, all that stuff. Michael, last thoughts, and I'll give you one question because we didn't touch on the uniform stuff. The Jets have so many primetime games that they're going to have to make a big decision. Which primetime game at home do they not wear the black uniforms? I think the likely contenders are either the Patriots early or the Colts late, because you're going to imagine for sure they're going to wear it against the Texans on Halloween. Normal people, you can turn the podcast off by now. This is just uniform talk. And then week 6, revenge game, October, they'll probably wear it then. So it's really, do they open up the season, home opener? Do they debut the green on whites? Do they do what they've done in years past where they go white on home against the Patriots? Or do they wear black for that one, and then maybe later on in the season they give what I was really hoping to see, which was that classic green on white versus the Colts all white uniforms, which I thought was going to be one of the cleaner uniform matchups of the season. Which one do you think is more likely to be a non-black uniform game?
I mean, there's great arguments both ways, which you just laid out, but I'm gonna go with the Patriots game
Yeah, I
as the
agree.
one where why did my brain just turn off? I'm saying that they are gonna wear in the Patriots game and
Oh,
not in the
really?
Colts game.
Oh,
And
okay.
let me tell you
Sorry.
why. And I was just kind of stalling to do some research here. But the Titans in their home opener last year against the Chargers, they did wear white jerseys. So that gives the Jets an opportunity to debut the green on white in week 2. So the Jets are like, okay, we got that out of the way. There's no need to squeeze that in here against the Patriots.
Maybe they
Let's
go
get
all
those
white
all
though.
blacks out there so we
The
could.
all white primetime look at home is pretty clean last year against the Chiefs and Bills.
It was, but you could still pull that out against the Colts, and against their blue on white, it's still going to look awesome. I think better than it would against the Patriots. I think the all black looks good against the Pats.
All right, these are the things we're going to be thinking about for the next 4 months. Screw the matchups. Screw watching the film. Let's think about the uniform matchups. All right, last one. What's the best uniform matchup now that we have the dates and the times of year, what the lighting is
I'm
going to
going to go with
be?
that one right there. The prime time, all white against Colts, blue on white. I think that's pretty
But do
awesome.
you know if it might not? If it's that, it would be great. But they might do green on white there. We're talking November 17th. I mean, usually they wear white on home in September, which is why I think it could be that home
I
opener
think
against the Pats.
either way, Jets Colts is just an elite uniform matchup.
Is there is
Whichever
there a
direction they go in
single?
that game.
I have to say, is there a single bad uniform matchup on the schedule? I mean, hell, even the Broncos week 4, I think, could be good with the green and white at home. I mean, I don't think there's a single bad. I mean, I'm very excited to see these. I'll say
We
best
got used to
uniform
talking
matchup.
about matchups because you needed a good matchup for the previous uniforms to look good. But now I
Yeah,
think just everything is a good matchup.
everything's gonna look good. Week 1's gonna look great too. I don't know. I'll think. I'll say I'm excited for that Texans Halloween game. All black. Maybe the Texans go white on red. Pretty
I mean,
nice combo
that's the
there.
only
You know?
thing. I think the black uniforms are great, but I think that's the only opportunity for a potentially bad uniform matchup because against their navy blue helmets, say they wear
All
navy
right.
blue pants, maybe that doesn't look great. So I think Houston is potentially the worst uniform matchup if they go all black,
Wow.
which
Really?
they on Halloween they definitely are. But let's say, like I said, like that wouldn't look too great if you got all black against navy blue helmets, navy blue
It'll look
pants.
fine. It'll look fine.
Kind of meh.
They did it against the Bears in 2022. It was I guess it was kind of mad that one.
Yeah, it
All
didn't
right.
look great, right?
No, you're right. All right, let's get out of here. We've done enough. We've said it all. Comment, tweet us your biggest matchups of the season. We will be back next week. We have a couple podcasts lined up, some interesting ones in the pipeline. But yeah, you can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter. Thank you everybody for listening. Have a great week. Go Jets.